Thank you very much. Appreciate both of you coming and your presentation. I want to shift the focus a little bit and get your reaction to this, because as a state legislator, I got involved in this because I think the magic, wrong term, but you know, the real genius behind this concept in Article 5 is federalism. And whether or not, I mean, I do want to see the right amendments passed and ratified, but I believe we won a long time before that. I believe the real key is calling and holding the convention. And this is why. Because it says to Congress, it says to the judiciary and to the executive branch that there's a new sheriff in town. And it's the one that was designed in Article 5 initially, and it's that balance of power between the states and the federal government. And I want them to realize that win or lose in the first round, we're there and we're not leaving. I can tell you that as a state legislator, that's the real attraction to me. Yes, I want to see these amendments put in place, but more importantly, I want the federal government to realize that this is a joint authority between the states and the federal government. And my 14 years in the legislature have taught me that we have lost that. We are completely subservient to the federal government at the state capitol. That should not be, and that is where I believe Article 5 really shines the brightest.
Amen.
Senator Lundberg, nice to see you. I think that's the thing that's most attractive to me about the idea is just the idea that Congress would have to look, right? Or really, I mean, it's not Congress, the executive branch. That is who is governing this country right now, the executive branch. And I use governing loosely. It's closer to ruling. Okay, that is what is happening. And so the idea of a president, right, or especially his or her, permanent class of advisors, having to sit there and look upon this creature of the Constitution, right, and see that it has been roused to action, emotionally, I like that a lot. Might it have the effect you say? Absolutely, it might, because it's never happened before. I think we all have to admit that we just don't know for sure. My concern is that it will have that effect at first, okay? And like any coward, okay, which is what a lot of the people who work in our federal government act like sometimes, okay? Like any coward looking upon a superior power or something that's supposed to be a superior power, if it doesn't turn out to be all it's cooked up for, they'll act like they won. And that's what I'm concerned about. I mean, we've seen this happen all the time. Might it work that they remember and they want it to never, ever, ever come back again, even if not a single amendment comes out of it to limit their power? It might. But I think the history of this country is that that's not the lesson that Washington, D.C. learns.
I want to just respond to two things. One is you mentioned that there's the real abuse of power is the federal bureaucracy, the administrative branch. And while I agree with that substantially, I don't think it's true that Congress is losing power. What they're expanding their subject matter jurisdiction regularly. They're regulating where we can go to the doctor. They send off the details of that to the administrative branch to make the rules. I think the number is about 2,000 times in Obamacare. It says the secretary shall make rules that. The abortion mandate of Obamacare is not in the legislation, it's in the regulations. But Congress grabbed the authority over medical care. And then why do they give it to the branches? Because they don't want to take the hard votes on abortion. They want to give it off to the secretary. They think they're delegating their power. They're not. They're giving away our rights to elect the rascals who make the law. That's what they're giving away. They don't have the power to delegate our right of self-government. And so they are stealing our power, our rights, by delegating, and they're increasing subject matter jurisdiction at all times. And so Congress is an important part of the problem. I agree with your analysis that they're passing a whole lot of the actual function to the regulatory branch, but it's bigger than that. Oh, the bigger thing actually is this. If this is not a fair summary, you correct me. Basically, you're saying we shouldn't fight until we're guaranteed a win. Let's just see how that works in politics. Did the ACLU try to remove God from the public square with a guarantee they were going to win? No. Did they give up the first time they lost? No. The only thing the thing that I have over 30 years of experience is the homeschooling movement. We were facing worse odds than this one, because homeschooling was facing the teachers' union is the most powerful lobby in every state legislature. The State Department of Education was on the same side as the teachers' union. The Superintendents Association was on the same side of the union. The Principals Association was on the same side of the union. We were outnumbered, outgunned, out everything. And we didn't say, oh, we're going to sit and wait until we win. And so just like the left removed God from the public square, just like the left brought abortion on demand, just like the left brought homosexual marriage to this country. They fought, they won a battle here, they lost a battle there, they won, they lost, they kept fighting, they didn't give up. You're preaching a doctrine that I call preemptive surrender. Just because we can't win everything we want right now, we're going to throw up our arms and act like we're in the French military. I come from a different line I'm a hillbilly from the Ozarks of Arkansas. And there are more people in this room by a factor of 3 than in my hometown of Timbo, Arkansas. But in Timbo, Arkansas, I don't care who's coming at us. We're going to stand our ground and we're going to fight. And on a spiritual level, the answer is this. The Bible says the gates of hell will not prevail against us. And the gates are not an offensive weapon. I don't want to be attacked by the gates. No, gates are where Satan has walled off his territory that isn't his, and he's strung up a gate to try to keep God's people out of the territory that actually belongs to God's people. Our job is to storm the gates. And maybe we'll take some knocks, maybe we'll lose some, maybe we'll win some. I didn't win every single case I litigated for homeschooling. But I'm sitting here 30 years later, and homeschooling is legal in every one of the 50 states. Every one of the 50 states. I know how to get victory because I know who brings the victory, and his name is Jesus Christ.
And we have time for hopefully 1 or 2 more questions. Sorry, go ahead.
You mentioned 3 key issues, and this might be a multi-part question. How many issues are there time for? How long is a convention of states that are considering these 3 issues? And the second part of the question is, would there be a way to address the reduction of or combining bureaucracies in the U.S. to reduce the overall bureaucracy and get more power back in Congress?
There is no firm time limit on the convention. My best estimate is that it would last for 4 to 7 months, something like that. And so we did a simulation of the Convention of States in Williamsburg, Virginia, 3 weeks ago, and we had all 50 states represented. They were conservatives from all 50 states, but we only had 2 days. We proposed 6 amendments in 2 days. Now, were they in final form? No. Would they take a lot more vetting? Yes. But we stuck to our job and we got things done. And I believe that you give people of that same mindset, and there will be more liberals there. There will be, because 11 states are controlled both houses by Democrats, and the legislators appoint the delegates. And so you're going to have more naysayers, but I can still count. 31 states, the Republicans control both houses. 8 states, the Republicans, like Colorado's one of the 8. Republicans control one house, the Democrats control the other. And so they're going to be more mixed. But you've got 31 states. And on this issue, the Republicans at every state are not that conservative, but they are conservative on this. How much power should the federal government have over my state? They're consistently more conservative on that than anybody in Washington, D.C. In fact, Democrats in state legislatures are more conservative on that than the Republicans are in Washington, D.C. And so I think 4 to 7 months is a pretty good guess. And so what was the other part of your practical question? I am 65. I can. How do you use? Yeah. Okay. Yes, it is a state convention issue, and one of the proposals that was debated and sent out there was on that topic, and it's, you know, it probably won't be the final form of it, but the basic essence of that is you reduce the power of congressional subject matter jurisdiction by right-sizing the Commerce Clause and the General Welfare Clause. And then, when I was the chairman of the Regulatory Reform Committee in Virginia, we proposed this. All the bureaucracies can propose regulations, Congress have to vote them up or down. If you do that, then you put political responsibility for all these stupid regulations, and they wouldn't nearly be as many. And so something like that, it's germane. How it would exactly end up, nobody knows, but that's what we'll be talking about.
And over here.
Yeah, mine has to do with risk. Are we really seriously worried about risk? I don't know anything that we've accomplished that never comes with risk, with some kind of risk. And the greatest accomplishments bring the greatest risk. And if we're worried about risk, we will never get off the ground, and it will never start. Let's remind ourselves about the signers of the Declaration of Independence. Every one of those signers lost everything. Several of them lost their own lives. One man turned a cannon on his house and blew the whole thing apart. They all lost everything. If we're not willing to lose something, we're not going to win anything. I think we need to keep that in mind.
We just agreed to go 15 more minutes, so we can take some more questions. That's okay with you guys?
And I agree. I agree that with great risk comes great reward. But I'd remind folks here, and now I'm really digging back, but Seneca, right, who was a Roman Stoic, he was a philosopher around, he lived during the time of Christ. He didn't know him, but he had an expression that luck, right, is when preparation meets opportunity. Okay, things will look like luck, right, when you're successful, but that's not what it was, right? It was preparation meeting opportunity. And so risk is worth calculating to the extent that you believe that there may be a more opportune time and you can be better prepared. If you don't think you can, and you think that there is absolutely no reversing the decline of this country, right, from the bottom up, then you ought to do everything you can right now, because that's it, right? Because there won't be a better time. And if that is your good faith calculation of where we are, then that should be what you believe. If you disagree, I'd happen to disagree, then that isn't what you ought to be doing. But I agree that this, no matter when it happens, if it happens, anybody who is trying to stop the growth of this federal government, which has come to be viewed by, I would say, probably most of our fellow citizens, to the extent that they think about it, as the place where their rights come from, okay? You are going to be taking on a lot of personal risk in doing that, no matter how you do it.
One real benefit of holding the convention is that, unlike the original Constitutional Convention, a convention of states, it will be televised, and lots of people will be watching. And it will be the greatest constitutional education maybe ever. And so in terms of, if we want to educate the American public about principles of federalism, you go watch the convention that was held in Williamsburg and see the debates. They were interesting debates. People were clashing about particulars and about specifics, and it's extremely interesting, and the people took it very seriously. So if you want to educate a group of people, and people will get inspired and think, oh, it could work differently. If they learn, for example, how the Uniform Commercial Code works, the banking law works really pretty well because the states got together and decided, we should make the banking laws work well across 50 states. And that's the reason your ATM card works well. It's because it's state law, not federal law. State laws. The state got together and cooperated on something that it made good sense. It wasn't in the subject matter jurisdiction of the federal government because they didn't have any jurisdiction over banking. The states got together and made banking laws. If the federal government created the rules for ATMs, you'd stick your card in the machine. 90% of the time it wouldn't work. And if it did work, they'd take 40% of your money and give you 60%. So the lesson that the best education ever will be the Convention of States.
And you, sir. And if you could wait for the microphone so we can hear.
I really like what you just said, but my question ends up being is how, with the media looking at and commenting on this convention, how do you control the spin? Because it seems that today, they're just making up the truth that's convenient for their cause.
Facebook,
Well,
YouTube, Twitter. We don't have to go through the media anymore. We can go around the media. And so I don't ever watch television, ever. I mean, I said corrected. Baseball games, football games, and especially hockey games. And so NCIS once in a while. But basically, I don't watch television news. I don't. It's irrelevant to me. I read my news on the internet. And so that is the trend, growing trend. We're not locked up by the media. People don't trust the media any more than they trust the establishment of either party. They want their media unfiltered. I'm friends with Ollie North, and I used to live pretty close to where he lived, and actually we both have moved, and I still live pretty close to him. We buy gas at the same gas station. I see him at the grocery store. And so when Ollie was having his hearings, the first day that Ollie was testifying, the media was beating the living daylights out of him, because until then, all the people had ever heard of Ollie North, they'd gotten filtered through the spin of the media, and they didn't like the guy. They were distrustful. They thought he was a bad guy, or something was wrong with Ollie. But the day they got to watch him gavel to gavel, unfiltered, the public relations just went whoop, off the charts in the pro-Ollie direction. And the next day, you saw all those members of the committee just backpedaling for all they were worth, because the public saw Ollie North unfiltered, and they cremated the senators who were being unfair to him. By the way, since I drove through his neighbor, I just lived a few blocks. All of his neighbors put sheets in their trees. And I thought people were hassling him, but I drove down the street, and it said, "Go get him, Ollie, we love you." I started crying when I saw the way his neighbors stood with him. The American public stood with Ollie North when they saw him unfiltered. And the American public will see this unfiltered. Let the spin doctors spin. It will not matter. Ollie North is the best answer to that question I know of.
May it be so.
And I'll just say quickly, because we want to get through all the questions, that actually is one of the practical reasons why I have my position, is because I think the media's power, it is really bad right now, and it is really frustrating right now. But they are like a cat getting flushed down a toilet. Not that I've ever seen that, but they are fighting like crazy. But they are fighting and grabbing for every piece of influence they can, because they know they're losing. In the long run, their power is going to be weakened. And I actually think their ability, the argument about the media's ability to filter the reality of a convention of the states, that argument has some purchase now. I think it will have less purchase in even 8 years.
6 months.
All right. And another question back.
Thank you. Tonight we acknowledged that the majority of American people are in it for the payout, and that the left currently views the convention as an impossibility. Is there any possibility that in the long run, a successful conservative convention could lead to a series, or even just one populist convention, a left-centered convention, that could do more harm than good?
Yes, it's possible. Anything is possible in American politics. But the question is, from what venue does that come? And because the voting is done by state, we have to convert so many states. And basically the deal is this. When people live together in tight geographical spaces, they start thinking that the purpose of government is to provide for my needs. When people live more dispersed out, they're much more conservative. It's the reason that Delaware is liberal and Idaho is conservative. It's the reason that Denver is liberal, and where I lived briefly in Yampa, Colorado, up in Routt County, is pretty conservative. And so as long as we continue to vote by states, it only takes 13 states to defeat something. So, and it only takes a single house in 13 states to defeat something. And so the day we can't get 13 states to defeat, say, let's repeal the Second Amendment, which would be one of the left's first agenda. The day we can't get 13 states to defeat that, this country is gone. It's gone on, any form of politics. It's gone. Our defense is our land. And our defense is not being all crowded together in cities. And so it's, we have a geographical protection because and the one factor that is improving a bit, the homeschooling movement in particular is continuing to grow, and it's raising up a generation that didn't get their education from the government. And as a result of that, they believe that they're not wired to believe that the purpose of government is to provide for my needs. We're at a pretty good, segment of those people. The front of the homeschooling movement is now 18 to 41 years old. And so there's enough people there that we've got a good cadre of people. And I don't think the percentages are going to rise that much in the future. We're kind of at a maximum percentage nationwide for that. So I think we're at a peak moment, and I think it's time to strike.
And down here, did you have a question?
Yeah.
Okay.
I actually do. Thanks. Hi, Dr. Farris. It's good to see you again. Mr. Murray, I am the state director for the Convention of States project here in the state of Colorado. And my question really for you is this, because I'm hearing something that's troubling me a little bit. We have 11 states that are controlled by Democrats, both houses. We have 8 states that are controlled, one house by Republicans, one house by Democrats. So we have a total of 19 states, or 31 states are controlled, both houses by Republicans. We need 34 to call the convention. A lot of what I've heard tonight really pits us against the liberals. It really pits us against the Democrats in particular. And especially in a state like Colorado, where we're trying to overcome that, we're trying to create a COS caucus within the Democrats in the House. I think that maybe we're focusing a little bit in the wrong direction, and I'd like to get your thoughts on that. I've heard you say before that the war really isn't us against the Democrats. The war really is us against the politically connected in Washington, D.C. of both parties, both stripes, who are taking away, they're colluding and taking away our rights. So are there, really just, that's it. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, your point is tonight. Yeah, tonight I know where I am. I know who I'm talking to, and so I'm talking to the audience based on the the jokes and the asides are fitted to the audience. But the substantive presentation, I would say the same. I might change my jokes and my asides, but my substantive presentation is going to be the same anywhere. Because, as I said briefly, Democrats in state legislatures are more conservative on how much power Washington, D.C. should have than what Republicans are in Washington, D.C. And that's true. Now, the problem is, in the various states, we haven't gotten a lot of Democrat support yet, not yet. And so there are two things. The political reality is this. This should be bipartisan. It's very hard for it to happen. It's very hard for it to happen. And so the reason the 8 states are viable is this. A Democrat in the state house in Colorado just has to look to the Colorado Senate to see that they might be defeated by a Republican. And so if they're getting enough pressure from their district to vote for something, even if they don't like it, they can say, it's better to vote for this thing than to lose my position if I've got 1,000 people breathing down my throat in a district where they might lose. And so, that's the political reality, is that if we shouldn't have to flip. This should be all 50 states unanimously rise up and do this. If people were thinking straight, all 50 states should rise up and do this. But it's hard. It's very hard. And so there has to be a credible threat that they're going to lose their position. And in split states, that threat is extremely credible. So I want to win them with sweetness and light and how it's right for them. But there's lurking in the shadows the possibility that Colorado could be Republican in both houses. I don't think it's going to happen this year. Our system is just a little too toxic. But, 2 years from now, maybe so. Maybe so.
I'll just say the one quick thing is that if this is going, if this were to work, I think that it is much, much, much better, perhaps essential, for this to at least have some bipartisan aspect to it. Because unfortunately, the progressives in our country, who have taken over the National Democratic Party, there are still non-progressives and Democratic parties in state legislatures all over the country. Dr. Farris is exactly right on that. But they view the Constitution as it is right now as their enemy. They don't like it, and not in a bad way, in the sense that, if you asked one of them, they'd say, I love the Constitution, it's just it's got some inconvenient parts, okay? Because they think that a Constitution based on an idea of negative rights, which is what our Constitution still is, right? A Constitution that says you have rights, and the only thing this document is supposed to do is make sure that the way our government is organized, it's not set up to come take them from you, okay? Progressives, in all good faith, don't believe in that because they don't know where rights come from, okay? They don't know that they are inherent in us because of who our creator is, right? Or if you want to go, the secular humanist route, because of our human nature. They don't get that. And so as a result, they view a negative rights constitution as a problem. If this is a Republican enterprise, it is only good. Every argument that I made is redoubled. It has to succeed, because if it fails, then we have made our interpretation of the Constitution, our view of what the Constitution is supposed to be, which, by the way, is the correct view of what the Constitution is supposed to be, we've made it partisan. And I don't want that. And again, really doing a great job moderating.
All right, and did you want to respond? Okay, and one more question for the time. Yes, sir.
We're going to do two.
Two.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't see your hand.
I'm a sucker for red hair.
So I have kind of a question for one for each of you. Earlier, forgive me for eavesdropping, but I overheard you say that politics is always downstream of culture. And then, as you were speaking, you said that we need to change the culture before we trigger a constitutional convention. But since politics is downstream of culture, wouldn't that negate the need for a convention because we would have already changed the problem? And then my question for you, Dr. Farris, is if the convention went forward and it failed, do we have a recourse? Is there a plan B? Would there be anything that we could do beyond that, or are we just dead constitutionally?
So thank you for your attentive eavesdropping. Where were you?
Sitting here, and you were like talking to people like right there.
Okay, this is an honest eavesdropper. I like this guy. Ideally, I guess. But I know to Dr. Farris, my view sounds either cowardly or utopian. Okay? It is not. It is neither. Okay? It's practical, and I think that you're not gonna. The culture will get to a point where there's a tipping point where enough people will absolutely be on your side and recognize the problem, where this either will fix itself, right, by the fact that you're electing the right people and the Supreme Court actually does start reversing itself. I'm not crossing my fingers for that, right? I think that it might very well be that you can accelerate the process if the culture is to a point where you trust that you're going to succeed, and because the culture will want it, okay? And a good example is women's right to vote. That started, the first state that allowed women to vote was Wyoming, okay? And it did it 45, 50 years before federal women's suffrage was passed. There were still some holdout states that had not done it. There were still a lot of people that actually disagreed with that less than 100 years ago. So the culture solved the problem by making sure the law reflects it. And that's usually the way it works. So I think that if you change the culture will see to it that its laws reflect it. I think part of the reason that we are in the predicament we're in now is because our laws and our constitutional order and our method of government reflects our culture a lot more than a lot of folks in this room would like to admit, and than I would like to believe.
This is the only plan that's in the Constitution. Everything else is extra-constitutional. And I stand on a passage of Scripture where it says, let today's troubles be enough for today. Don't worry about tomorrow. Let tomorrow have trouble for itself. We will cross the bridge of what's possible when things go really bad, when something happens. And so I will, there are certain trigger points that could trigger really bad alternatives. But as a Christian and as a believer in the Constitution, I cannot even consider anything that's extra-constitutional, and especially not anything that's violent, until I've exhausted every single lawful alternative I have at my disposal. And so I'm not ready to give up. I'm not ready to, it's way premature to think about that for lots of reasons, not the least of which you'd have to evaluate the shifting standard. If we've been invaded by China, if that's the reason it doesn't work, well, then all bets are off. I'll tell you what's going to happen if we're invaded by China. I'm going to lead the army to go shoot them back, and we're going to take our country back. So until my dying breath. But, it depends on what happens. There's just too many variables to be able to answer that with any kind of logical consistency. There was something that the idea of being downstream from culture is, I agree with it more than you think. 2/3 of the American public believe that the federal government is abusing its authority and it has too much power. They have no idea what to do about it. They don't know any of the details, but the culture is with us on the general principle. And what the Convention of States will do will educate a great number of people that their vague understanding that the federal government is too big and it's dangerous to our liberties actually has a remedy, and they can understand some of the details about that. Will we get everybody? No, for the very reasons you say. I mean, you're absolutely right. And so it's going to require that we block and tackle and run and do hardball politics. The ratification phase will be extremely rough and tumble politics. It will be. And it will test the mettle of the American people. But I don't see a realistic alternative. If anybody doesn't think that the government that we've got now in Washington, D.C. is going to curtail our liberties not less than 10 years from now in a significant way, you're just not paying attention. We don't have a long time. We've got to act now in a lawful, God-fearing, constitutional honoring way. I took elderly privilege of saying we could take this lady's question. I'm the elderly.
Thank you very much. I'm Loretta Perry, and I'm in District 38 here in Colorado. And I'm working very hard and have been for 3 years among all the things I do to get people involved in this. I have one question that I cannot answer as good as I'd like to because it doesn't always bring the results I want. And that question is, we have a constitution now and it's not being followed. What good does it do to add an amendment?
The answer is we have two constitutions. We have the Constitution as written, and we have the Constitution as interpreted by the Supreme Court. The goal of this process is to return to the spirit of the Constitution as written by certain selective amendments that are so well written that there's no wiggle room for the court. The court has tended to follow amendments. Rob Nadelson points this out effectively in his research. The court tends to follow amendments rigorously and faithfully for a long time. Maybe they won't follow forever, but if we deliver 40, 50 years of freedom, we've done a good thing. And so the examples of the 13th Amendment, the 19th Amendment, and the Hobby Lobby case with the Religious Freedom Restoration Act are effective times where we reversed the Supreme Court and we stood up for what was right and it stuck. And so the answer is we can reverse these bad Supreme Court decisions and it will stick and we will prevail.
I'll try that one.
Okay.
I only have 400 and I need 1,000 in my district.
Well, it depends on what district. Who are your representatives?
Well, they're going to be changing
Okay.
very shortly.
Did you want to say anything else? No. Okay. All right. All right. Well, thank you everyone so much for your time and attention. Obviously, this has been a panel of lawyers that go long, so thank you very much. All right.
You did a great job.
Excellent. All right. Excellent. All right, thank you. And we had, if Carrie, if you want to come up real quick, and we have one announcement. And also for Centennial Institute, we do have Dr. Francis Beckwith, who is the visiting fellow for conservative thought, who will be with us at a Centennial Institute event this coming Monday to talk about the future of conservatism, which is a very timely topic. So that will be this Monday night at 7 p.m. here again in Loprano Hall.